Sholay. I've seen it many times on the big screen, but I want to see it again, and probably Mughal-e-Azam as well. Pass. I'd say probably Andaz Apna. यार ये मैं आंसर करूंगा तो प्रॉब्लम हो जाएगा.
What have you got up your sleeve?
Well, we've got the Anarchy, which is a TV series adaptation of William Dalrymple's epic saga on the history of the East India Company. It really is a story that has to be told with that epic scope and scale, the way that the Game of Thrones or the Crown have been told.
So have talks begun with the Netflixes and the HBOs of the world?
Talks have just begun.
What are we talking about in terms of resources that you require to be able to put something like ballpark?
The per episode costs for shows like Game of Thrones and The Crown range anywhere from 8 million to 20 million an episode.
Now you believe that India has been poised to have its crossover or breakout moment, just as we've seen with the Parasite and so on and so forth. Why has it been so elusive?
Because we've been victims of our own success in a way that traditionally India has never really had to reach out to the world.
What's exciting you about the stuff that you're seeing being made today?
A show like Kohra, for example, right? It's very local, very rooted. But I think the beats of the way that the story unfolds is told in a very international way.
Are you also seeing a diversity from where these scripts are coming in?
I think the number of people from the smaller towns, I'd say even sometimes from villages, who reach out to us with, even if it's a concept note, it might not be a full screenplay, is quite significant.
What was the one that surprised you? What was the one that you were absolutely sure of?
Burfy was one which was the most difficult to pin down, but you knew it at a visceral level, you reacted to the material. Chennai Express actually was another film where, you know, there was a full narration that happened with a group of 20 people, and we were laughing off and like falling off our chairs.
What was the casting call that you made that kind of worked out the way that you had imagined it to?
I think probably Dangal. And at that time, of course, Irfan, he was someone we had in mind. He would have done a wonderful job. But then I got a call from Amir at that time. Many other stars of his stature might not have been okay with playing an overweight wrestler who's like a bit of a has-been, who's living out his dreams through his daughters.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Young Turks Reloaded. I'm Shereen Bhan. The Indian media, entertainment and film business is poised for the next big wave of disruption. After a wave of corporatization and consolidation, industry is now grappling with a booming OTT market, a rising live entertainment economy and a film business that's yet to fully recover from COVID and the onslaught of video streaming. Today, we roll out the red carpet for a man who spent a good part of the last 2 decades mastering the art of storytelling, from delivering box office hits like Dangal and Chennai Express to producing game-changing series like Rocket Boys. He's now ready with his next big project. Siddharth Roy Kapur, welcome to the Young Turks podcast. Thanks very much for joining us on the program.
Thanks so much for having me,
So
Shereen.
let's start with the big reveal. What have you got up your sleeves?
Well, we've got the Anarchy, which is a TV series adaptation of William Dalrymple's epic saga on the history of the East India Company. It's one of those books that you just can't put down.
Yeah.
And when I first heard that William was working on this book, I actually found out about it a few months before it was going to be published. So I reached out to him immediately. He was kind enough to give me a manuscript. And I read through it, just chugged through it in one sitting, and realized that this was.
Buff?
I am a huge history buff. I am, and it's
Because
just
William Dalrymple cannot be done in a day.
well, it was one of those things which just sucks you in because I've always been very interested by the history of colonialism and of course the Mughal rule, like sort of before that, and the way William writes, he writes with such drama, and the way he treats his characters, he just makes them live and breathe. And so I reached out to him instantly after that and told him I'd love to take on the rights. And, after a bit of back and forth, because he wanted to know what the vision was.
Yeah.
And we realized that we had exactly the same vision.
So
which
what
is
was
about,
the vision that you painted for him?
Well, the vision really is about how contemporary the subject really is. I mean, we talk about these global corporations which are larger than most nation states, being in multiple countries and having the ability to actually influence the world. Here's where it actually happened 500 years ago, where you had a global corporation with its own private army coming and taking over a subcontinent that was 25% of the GDP of the world at that time. And, you've got delicious characters in there, from Robert Clive to the Mughals, to the Dutch, to the French, to the Portuguese, to the Jagat Seths, the moneylenders. So it really is a story that has to be told with that epic scope and scale, the way that the Game of Thrones or the Crown have been told. And I think I've always had the ambition of being able to take our content and reach out to the world with it. And this is a story that we should be telling ourselves.
So this is going to be mounted for a global audience.
This is going to be mounted for a global audience.
And you managed to bag a big name to do that for you.
So we've got Stephen Frears coming on board. I used to watch films like High Fidelity and Dangerous Liaison when I was, in college. And to imagine that the director of those epics is now going to be actually helming the Anarchy is just...
And how did that come about?
Well, our partners Whip, actually, which is a US production company, they've made shows like Mayor of Easttown and Dickinson. Paul Lee, who runs Whip, was running ABC when I was at Disney and running India. And we stayed in touch for a long time. And then he started Whip and I started Roy Kapur Films. And we were chatting about what we could do together. And when I told him about these rights, he said, wow, that's something I'd love to collaborate on.
Right.
So we got together, and through Paul and through Whip, we were able to reach out to Stephen. And he knows William, incidentally.
Okay.
And that helped. And he'd heard of the book, he read it and loved it, and that's how he came on board.
So when do we finally see this being converted into reality on screen?
Well, we're ready with our materials now. We're ready with the writing, and I think the next stage really is to figure out the right home for it, so the right platform. That's a process that's ongoing right
So
now.
how do you pick the right home for something that you're producing? I mean, give us an example in the context of this with the Anarchy. How do you find the right home?
I think the platform that can actually give you the resources to tell the story in the way it should be told, and that gives you the global reach to be able to reach out to everyone who you believe the story will resonate with, would be the right platform. And I think, you can literally count them on one hand, maybe two. There are 5 or 6 platforms around the world that have the resources and have the ability to be able to give you that reach.
So have talks begun with the Netflixes and the HBOs of the world?
Talks have just begun. A little too early to sort of get into details around that, but it is exciting.
I would imagine that exciting. But, again, just break this down for our audience. Like, from the time that you actually decide that, okay, this is a script that you want to actually convert into something that goes to screen, to reaching out to a platform that could potentially house this, what are we talking about in terms of timelines? And then finally, the eventual execution.
It takes time. These massive projects take a long time, because what happens is that you need to find the right creative team to start with, the right writers, the right director. You then go through various iterations around drafts of scripts and pilots and Bibles. Then you find something that, okay, fine, this is something that we now all have bought into. We love what we've put down on paper, and that's when you take it to a platform. From that point onwards, it's really about getting the right platform on board, and then you start your pre-production. So the process can usually take anything from 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years, which also means that you have to have deep pockets to be able to sustain yourself for 3 to 5 years.
Well, if that's all you're doing, then yes. Thankfully, you do continue with life as usual while you've got these big projects that you're hatching.
Yeah.
So the good part is that you're making films and series and doing all that, good stuff, while keeping your eye on the prize, which is, large projects like this.
But, for a large project like this, with a global ambition and a global aspiration mounted to that scale, what are we talking about in terms of resources that you require to be able to put something like ballpark?
Well, the per episode costs for shows like Game of Thrones and The Crown range anywhere from 8 million to 20 million an episode. I heard
Wow.
the budgets of the latest Yellowstone, series were actually $20 million an episode. So you're talking significant funds. As I said, there are a limited number of global platforms that can actually have the ability to fund you in that manner. And those are the ones that you talk to.
And, link this back to what's happening in India when you're delivering for an OTT platform here in India. What do the costs? I mean, they're clearly nowhere in the vicinity of what we just talked about.
No.
But what are we talking about?
Well, in India, the budgets are pretty different. So I think you're talking anywhere from, if it's a show that's really quick and easy and like more intimate and a more controlled setting, it could be anywhere from 50 lakhs to a crore per episode. But if it's something larger and at scale, then it could go up to 4 or 5 crores an episode.
This global aspiration that you spoke of, and this has been something that you've been rooting for a long time now. You believe that India's been poised to have its crossover or breakout moment, just as we've seen with The Parasite and so on and so forth. Why has it been so elusive? What makes you believe that we're finally there?
So it's been so elusive probably because we've been victims of our own success in a way, because we have such a large captive market of our own that traditionally India has never really had to reach out to the world.
Right.
You've had the Indian audience and you have the diaspora audience that accounts for millions and millions of people wanting to watch the stuff that you're producing.
Yeah.
And so unlike Italian cinema or French cinema or German cinema, which has had to find new markets, we haven't had to do that. But I think the time has come now where you have a whole generation of filmmakers who've been schooled in an international style of storytelling, but who are still rooted and want to tell stories from their own country. And I think that actually gives you the ability now to really believe that you can reach out to the rest of the world. But I feel the more rooted your stories and the more local your stories, but with a global style of storytelling, those are the ones most likely to succeed.
So what's exciting you about the stuff that you're seeing being made today that gives you the hope and the belief and the confidence that we are ready to make that inflection?
With a lot of the stuff that we're making, especially on streaming platforms today, I think, you've seen stuff that is being told with a pretty global sensibility. I'd just give you a few examples, like a show like Kohra, for example, right? It's very local, very rooted, but I think the beats of the way that the story unfolds is told in a very international way. Right? So I think it's about finding local stories and finding internationally appealing ways and global ways to be able to tell it.
When you look at a story, you look at a script, what draws you? What's the first thing that draws you to a story or to a script that kind of tells you in your gut that this is something that you want to take forward, this is something that you want to make? Which have been some of the examples where something's jumped up at you and it's been a success, but also where it hasn't and it's gone on to surprise you?
So the first thing is I react as an audience, right? I react as just someone who enjoys movies or enjoys shows or, just like a viewer. And so when I read something and I feel like, oh, wow, this is something that I would really want to watch, that's the first thing that really has to stand out from
And how many scripts do you get in a week?
Oh, we get a whole lot. I mean, we have a team that really, their only job is to sift through the material that comes in. I'd say anywhere from 10 to 15 scripts a week, probably, if not more.
Are you also seeing a diversity from where these scripts are coming in? I'll ask you this in the context of a conversation that I had with the founders of an audio streaming service. And they said that they're getting stories coming in from the interiors of UP, from Chhattisgarh, and those are the ones that are actually turning out to be their big blockbuster hits. What are you experiencing?
The same thing.
Really?
The same thing, which is very heartening. I think the number of people from the smaller, more the smaller towns, I'd say even sometimes from villages who reach out to us with, even if it's a concept note, it might not be a full screenplay, is quite significant. And we have a website and we have an email link that helps people to be able to just send us their material. And that, I think, has shown us the diversity in terms of the places from which we've been getting that content.
So what was the one that surprised you? What was the one that you were absolutely sure of and it delivered on that expectation?
I think probably Burfy was one which was the most difficult to pin down, but you knew it at a visceral level, you reacted to the material. Because, Anurag Basu has this amazing ability to be able to conjure up a world without really putting that much down on paper.
Yeah.
So he actually talked us through what he had in mind as far as the film was concerned. And he didn't have a complete screenplay, but just the characters and the world he was able to sort of envision and what more important than envision, actually communicate,
Huh.
just blew us away. So that was one of those leaps of faith that I'm so glad we took. Because it could have been very easy to say, yeah, just come back to us with a final screenplay and then we look at it. But it was one of those films where we said, no. We've made Metro together. We'd made Life in a Metro before that. And we had the confidence in him to be able to take that forward. Chennai Express actually was another film where, there was a full narration that happened with a group of 20 people, and we were laughing our off and like falling off our chairs. And it was just, one of those films which you know that if this is executed in the right way, it's going to be a rip-roaring success.
It's interesting that you talked about the fact that it was a narration, it wasn't even a full screenplay or perhaps not even a finalized script. And I remember watching, I can't remember who it was, but these film stars saying that, when they actually, and this is like maybe 20 years ago, or even 15 years ago, saying that scripts were actually being written on set, dialogues were being handed over to you before you actually got onto set. How much of that process at the back end has changed, especially with corporatization and so on and so forth?
That's changed very significantly. Yeah. Today you have, fully completed screenplays with dialogues ready well in advance before you go into prep. Actors expect it, the HODs expect it, everyone expects it, and more importantly, those funding the film expect it, and rightly so. But you do need to leave a certain amount of flexibility for creativity to strike, right? So I think it's important while a scene is being played out, if, the writers on set or the writers called in, and there might be certain things that the actors and the director feel they want to play out differently. You always need to leave that
for some spontaneity.
But that can only happen when you're really well planned.
Yeah.
Because that room for spontaneity needs to be still within a controlled budget, within, a certain number of days of shoot. And that, I think, is important to leave space for.
So as a producer, what's the stuff that you sweat today? What's the small stuff that you let go? What's the stuff that you sweat today?
I think budgets, obviously, is something that everyone looks at very closely, and you should look at very closely as a producer. The script is something that you should really, really look at very, very closely, because you need to be completely convinced about every line that's in there. Either you get convinced or you're able to convince, but one way or the other, the entire team associated with the project needs to be on the same page. The casting is something the producer needs to be very, very closely involved with.
How involved are you personally with the casting?
I'm pretty involved with the casting. Having been around as long as I have, having the relationships one does, it's important to be able to pick on, pick up the phone on the people that you want to be able to cast, and give them a feeling of how passionate you are about the material, so that they understand that it's something that they should give consideration to as well. So for the key cast, that's something I'm quite involved in.
What was a casting call that you made that kind of worked out the way that you had imagined it to?
I think probably Dangal was that one time that was a very important casting call, because I remember that we had a young girl in our creative team who came up with the idea, having read an article in the Times of India. And she came up and said that, that we want to make a film on these. I mean, wouldn't that make a great story?
Yeah.
The Fogat sisters. And I said, absolutely, you must go and, check it out and go and meet the family. She did. And she said, it's about the father and the daughters, not just about the daughters. And she came back and we spoke to Nitesh Tiwari. We just made a film with him just before that Chillad party. He loved the story. He went away and wrote a great screenplay. And then we started brainstorming on who to cast. And at that time, of course, Irfan was someone that we'd worked with already on Pan Singh Tomar and Metro and so many. Yeah. He was someone we had in mind. He would have done a wonderful job. But then I got a call from Amir at that time saying that, he had time to sort of listen to scripts. And I immediately thought, what about this for him? And that's one call that actually really helped, because I think he was able to see the potential in it. Many other stars of his stature might not have been okay with playing an overweight wrestler who's like a bit of a has-been, who's living out his dreams through his daughters.
Yeah.
But he immediately saw the potential in it. Of course, in typical Amir style, he asked us if we'd wait for 5 years.
What was your response?
Our response was absolutely, because I think when you know him well enough, you know that he might say that, but it might be difficult for him to resist something that he loves that much. And so pretty much after a year after him saying yes, 5 years later, he came back and said he'd do it. Immediately.
And that's interesting because I think my research tells me been involved with 6 Indian movies that have made it to the Oscars.
Yeah.
So why do you think, or what do you believe has been that, the ingredient or the secret sauce that you've kind of meshed into the work that you did for these films to make it where they did?
Well, it's hard for me to be able to define that. I think it comes from the sensibility probably of the choices that one makes along the way. And thankfully, those are the ones that get selected by the Film Federation of India to be the ones that get sent for the Academy Awards. But it probably is because one has a bit of a global outlook on things. And I'm always looking for ways in which to be associated with content that has the ability to resonate beyond our borders. That probably might be the reason.
Speaking of the Oscars, the rules have changed now. You're going to have to watch every movie.
Every movie,
every
I know.
movie. But what do you believe that? Do you believe that that's a good thing to do? And how do you see this changing things?
I do actually think that's a good thing to do because I think it's only fair for a film to get judged as compared to everything else. And it's probably not okay for members to be able to vote, having watched only 10 or 15 of the films, that are up for grabs. So it's definitely going to be a much more demanding process of the Academy members. But I was watching a lot of those movies anyway, so I think for me it shouldn't be too bad.
How much time do you actually spend consuming?
A lot. And firstly, I just enjoy consuming content. I think whether or not I was in this business, I'd still be doing it.
You do it irrespective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up watching copious amounts of films. So in that sense, nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed. But a lot has changed as far as this business is concerned. And that's what I want to talk to you about. Where do you believe we're at? As I said, we've gone through that phase of corporatization. We've gone through a phase of consolidation now, especially as far as the television side of the business is concerned. Where do you believe the industry finds itself today?
It's at an interesting crossroads today. I think we've gone through a period of consolidation in the last couple of years where you've seen a lot of consolidation amongst the top sort of corporates in the space, which has led to a certain less aggression in the calls being taken, the number of things being made, etc. Probably because organizations tend to go a little quiet when they are consolidating, merging, acquiring, etc., etc. And I dare say now that water's found its own level on that score, I think the next few months are going to see a lot more activity. The second part, of course, is that consumer habits have changed, and we have to acknowledge that. So I think what COVID did is really made people realize how convenient it is to be able to watch content at the tip of your fingertips.
Yeah.
And now to get out of that cycle takes much more. So to get someone to pay money to watch a film in a cinema hall, to go through the effort of booking the ticket, getting out of their house, braving the traffic, braving the ads that come before the film, braving an interval, all those things, it needs to be something really compelling. And which is why you've been seeing in the last few months a bit of a feast or famine situation. So the films that are doing well are doing incredibly well. I dare say they're doing better than they might have done even before COVID.
Okay.
But the films that are not working now have no flaw to how badly they can do. Which therefore means that the game has been upped as far as we're concerned, and which is a good challenge for us, because it means we need to give people something compelling and then they will come.
Speaking about giving people something compelling, there seems to be almost a disconnect between what audiences want and what filmmakers are delivering. And why do you believe that's the case?
Probably in Hindi cinema, what has happened in the last few years is that we've been trying to be all things to all people, and therefore becoming nothing for no one, in a sense, right? Because we have such a large audience we believe we need to cater to, it becomes a little difficult for us to be able to figure out who our core audience is. And I know that's a little bit of a broad thing to say, but writers need to just write based on what the story they want to tell, and don't let that get diluted by feeling like I need to reach this audience and that audience and the cities and the villages and the rural and the urban and the global. Just tell the story that you want to tell and tell it with complete conviction. And I think then you will realize that audiences will come.
So, do you expect 2025 to be a better year, both in terms of the quality of content as well as the pipeline of content? Because we've had a problem with both post-COVID.
I think so. I think 2023 was an incredible year. I mean, you had 5 movies crossing the 500 crore mark at the box office, which has never happened in Indian cinema before. 24 was a little bit of a lower year, and now 25, I'm hoping, will once again prove that, the audiences have come back to the cinema halls. Because for the movies that work, like I said, the sky's the limit today. And that gives me a lot of hope that if, the big movies this year fire and do incredibly well, and you always have a few surprises. So some of the smaller movies come in and just, like 12th Fail or like Munjia, for example, come and just surprise you. That really is the hope.
I was having a conversation with Ajay Bijli. A couple of interesting insights from that conversation. One, he believes that, producers who had kind of dumped cinema halls to go the OTT way are probably now going to reimagine that strategy and bring cinema back as well. But the other aspect, of course, is, is this consumption behavior irreversible? You were talking about the fact that the convenience aspect of it, and you can, your mobile phone is your entertainment console for all practical purposes today. Are we now stuck at this 20-25% kind of occupancy as far as theatres are concerned? And if that is the case, then what happens 5-10 years on?
I actually don't think that's the case. No. And a few data points give me that security. Firstly, live events have gone completely through the roof, which means people want those
entertainment.
They want entertainment. They want out of home entertainment.
Yeah.
It's not like because there's a place for being cooped up at home and watching something yourself, whether at home or on the move. That very private viewing experience, there's a place for that, and it's very convenient. But I think we are social animals, right? We want to be able to enjoy things with our friends, with our families, in groups. We want to be able to go out. Disposable income has risen. People have the money today to pay for those experiences. You're seeing the way concerts and theatre is doing, which means that there is definitely a place for experiences. And if you can make a cinematic event an experience, right, rather than just looking at it as a film, right, the way that maybe Chhawa did, where there was that sense of patriotism and nationalism, or whatever you might want to call it, and people came out in large numbers, the way that Animal did, right, whether you like the film or not, the fact is that it was so shocking and was a style of storytelling you were so unused to that people just couldn't help themselves but come to the theatre to watch it. Or the way that Gadar 2 did, right? You're talking about a brand that's like more than 20 years old, coming back and just going completely gangbusters at the box office. So I think it's really about us recalibrating the kind of things that we put out. I would name a film like Munjia as well. No stars at all. It's about a creature, but it's rooted in folklore. Now, when you look at that, you realize that, oh wow, it's taking your local culture and repurposing it for a younger audience. And giving them this really interesting creature that a lot of money has been spent on in VFX and without big stars. And it did more than 100 crores at the box office. So these are the swings for the fences I think we need to take.
Speaking about making strategic bets at this point in time, and I want to talk about the economics of putting something together, either for the cinemas or for OTT at this point in time. What are the challenges as a producer for you? And do you believe that the costs will have to be reimagined as well and be repurposed for this new reality that we're talking about?
I do think so. And to some extent, we're already seeing a little bit of recalibration there when it comes to costs of actors, of heads of department.
Actors are taking salary cuts.
Well, I wouldn't say salary cuts, but they're definitely looking at now coming in more on the back end and taking less on the front end. So,
what does that mean exactly?
So which means actually enjoying the success of the film if it works. So taking less upfront and then becoming partners in the success.
So it's kind of become more revenue share going forward.
Yes. So there's a component of obviously, something that's built into the cost already, which is a fee. And then there's sharing in the profit. And therefore the upfront fee can be lower to reduce the cost of the project.
Yeah.
And then in success, everyone gains. So that I think is becoming much more prevalent as we go forward.
When you say much more prevalent, I mean, is this like 5-10% of the projects, or is this much more?
It's more than that. I'd say there's still a way to go as far as that's concerned, but see, the first thing is that everyone's now aware that it is an issue and costs need to be brought more in control, need to be more streamlined. So I think everyone's aware of it and sort of acknowledges it. There have definitely been some deals that have happened in the recent past where actors have taken less upfront and are willing to share in the back end. We need to see much more of it.
How much is the cost of talent of the key stars as part of the overall mix as far as costs are concerned for perhaps a big project?
If it's a big project, it could be as much as 30 to 40%.
30 to 40% is just the actor's cost.
Yeah. The lead actors. But, when you look at it, a lot of the viability of that project is based on those actors being in it. So I think when you look at it that way, you take out the drama from it and you take out the fact that, oh wow, it is 30 and 40% paid out to individuals. It's the same thing in Hollywood as well, right? If Tom Cruise is doing Top Gun, Maverick, a lot of that budget of Top Gun Maverick is going to be his fee, right? But that's because that film is going to get a massive opening because of Tom Cruise. And it's the same thing with our films. I mean, if Salman Khan or Amir Khan or Shah Rukh Khan or Hrithik Roshan are in a film, a lot of the economics are based on their presence in the film.
What about women?
Yeah.
Are the women getting paid any better?
They are getting paid better, but there's always room for
nowhere close
more
to parity. Yeah.
No.
What is the difference that we're talking about today?
It's quite significant. I mean, if you looked at it completely, without any lens, I do believe that it still is commensurate in terms of the commercial potential of those projects, because audiences have told us that they will come in certain numbers for certain kinds of movies. And therefore that, I think, is the up and down that does exist, whether you like it or not. But can there be more parity? Yeah, sure, they can.
Is that something that you're consciously looking at?
I am.
In your projects?
I try to make sure that we are as conscious of that as possible. The one thing I will say about the film and TV industry is that I genuinely don't believe that there's any bias when it comes to gender, religion, caste, creed, whatever it might be, as long as someone has commercial value. Right? It really does boil down to economics. It's capitalism in its purest sense. So if there is economic value being brought to the table by the presence of someone in the film, whether that's an actor or an actress or a writer or a composer or a lyricist, they are generally paid what is commensurate with what they're bringing to the table. That's one thing that I would definitely say about the film industry.
We're talking about a challenging period for the business. In terms of monetization, I mean, what could be the next sort of wave of adding revenue streams? What are you considering at this point in time? What's working? What are you looking at?
We haven't really fully exploited the ability to take our content into revenue streams outside of just the sort of distribution of that content. So, for example, now our key revenue streams are theatrical, satellite, music, and streaming, right? But we don't really have that much merchandising, gaming, licensing. These things are much more looked at as marketing tools rather than revenue streams at this point of time. And I think we've made huge strides in these areas in many other industries rather than the film industry. And it's time for us from the film and television industries to be able to actually now look at those as really tangible revenue streams.
Are you starting to look at that?
We will. But it depends on the kind of project, right? If it's something that has that franchise value, that has the value of where the characters or the plot is something that lends itself to being consumed in different formats, those are the ones that you should pick.
The kind of OTT consumption that we're seeing, and I was just looking at some reports which is suggesting that we could grow again by another 20% from where we are today as far as online streaming is concerned. As a producer and catering to that business, are you doing things differently? Is there a more refined, evolved playbook in light of the lessons and the experiences that you've already had?
For sure.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the storytelling as well. I mean, there's a lot of information that comes to us from our platform partners because they They've got the algorithms, they've got the data, they've got the viewership data. They understand drop-offs of audiences, length of time spent on a particular piece of content, why they're dropping off.
Is it true that you're asked to kind of choreograph scripts with imagining that somebody is going to be on their phone constantly while watching a series?
Well, thankfully, it hasn't got to that.
No?
No. But there is definitely that feeling in the back of any writer's mind that, okay, this is a very ambient viewing experience because people might be doing 20 other things simultaneously, checking out a reel, ironing their clothes, chatting with someone while they're watching my content. And therefore, I need to be that much more compelling to be able to draw them in and get their full attention.
So what do you do in this situation? I mean, as someone who's putting something together to cater for all of these eventualities of having a chat with your boyfriend while being perhaps on another device and doing 35 other things. I mean, how much more compelling can you make something?
There's only so much you can think about it. You finally just have to tell a really compelling story. Because you can get caught up in that, because someone could be doing that in a theater as well.
Right.
Today, the attention spans are really limited. People's have been used to bite-sized pieces of content. It's like a little dopamine rush when they watch a reel or when they watch a short film or when they're just chatting with someone, DMing each other on Instagram.
Yeah.
It's become a very bite-sized experience in terms of the way that they receive content. And you have to accept that. So when you're doing long format storytelling, you need to be that much more cognizant of the fact that I need to tell a compelling story. I can't afford to do too much of a slow burn, right? If I want to do that, I might have to compromise a little bit at a certain point to be able to draw them in and then do some more exposition. But there's a limit to which you can put this into a formula. At the end of the day, it's all about the subject that you select in terms of the story that you want to tell and the compelling way in which you tell it. And then you just hope for the best.
But, is there something to be said about the tyranny of data? I mean, you were talking about platforms sharing what the algorithms are throwing up as well. Does that also get in the way of how creative you want to be or some of the creative choices that you want to make because of what the data is supposedly telling you?
It could. But you need to avoid that and you need to be able to have partners on both sides of the aisle, both in the platform and on the production side, that realize that actually that data will only tell you what people have already done before rather than be able to predict what they might do in the future.
Yeah.
A show like Adolescence, right? I doubt any data could have told you that people will be watching that in the numbers that they are watching it in. And that just comes from just brilliant storytelling, captivating storytelling. I don't think the only hook to that show is the one take in each episode. That's tremendous.
Yeah.
But it's the ability to tell that story in such a compelling, incredible way, a very dark story, right? But something that was able to draw you in so beautifully. Now, I don't know which algorithm is going to tell you that, right? So you constantly have to have people swinging for the fences and trying different things. While sure, you should look at the algorithms and let them inform some of your choices. But when something really unique presents itself, you should have the ability to be able to still pick that.
So have you had such conversations? When was the last time that you had such a conversation with someone where your gut told you that, okay, it's different from what the data may be telling you and you decided to swing?
I have a couple of projects on my slate that are like that.
Yeah.
That might not necessarily be ones that the data is telling you people want to watch, but I feel are so unique that they will be something that will
Which
break
ones?
through. I can't get into details right now, but there are some on the film side and some on the streaming side that hopefully we'll get the right partners on board in the next few months to be able to tell those stories in the way they should be told.
So what is the biggest frustration as a producer that you face today?
I guess there's lots of factors that are outside of your control. So that does tend to be the things that frustrate, I dare say, not just producers, but anyone in business, right? I guess the fact that you want to be able to have the resources to tell all the stories that you believe need telling, and those resources might be limited because there are only so many stories being told. So you have to then be more patient about making the ones that you can make at a certain point of time and holding back the ones that need someone to be able to have the faith in to be able to tell at the right time.
But chasing capital, raising capital, I mean, is that the least favorite thing for you to do?
I wouldn't say that's the reason I got into this business. That's for sure. But it is very important, right? Because if you want to tell the stories that you want to tell, you want to have the wherewithal to be able to tell them. And I think our industry offers some really scalable opportunities. We've got the ability to actually be the next Korea when it comes to being able to take our soft power out to the world. And I don't think India has really scratched the surface there in terms of being able to take our stories.
But we've been
global.
talking about India being the next Korea for a few years now.
That's true.
So again, I come back to what I asked you. Why do you believe that we haven't got there, and what do you believe will ensure that we finally do?
We probably haven't acted on that ambition yet. Korea's been at it since the early 2000s, if not earlier, right? And they've had a lot of government impetus there as well. They actually have the government actively involved with them in that exercise, both in terms of hard funding as well as the softer part about helping them find distribution partners, etc., etc. And I think if we're able to do the same,
so do you want the government to get involved?
Well, if it's about supporting the industry and helping the industry to be able to either find tangible financing, like sort of opportunities, and helping us being able to find distribution, for sure. Yeah.
So, we've got the Big Wave Summit here in Mumbai, which
Yes.
is basically going to bring together, of course, all the Indian stakeholders, but global stakeholders as well. What's your hope with that?
I think it's a great start. It's a really great start. The first thing it tells me is that the government's thinking about the entertainment industry, right? That I think is a massive step forward. Just the fact that we're having this summit, I think in itself is something that we should all be very happy about. What we do with it is really up to us, because we need to build on it. We need to treat this first year as just the first year in the exercise and not expect magic to come out of it. But it's when you do this year on year, you bring the right people in, you have markets there where people can interact and talk to each other about global, financing opportunities, co-production opportunities, creative opportunities. That's when real things will develop from it. And I hope that that's the start of the government really looking at how they can leverage the soft power of our country, right? And the soft power that is given to us by our massive media and entertainment industry in terms of perception. Not massive yet in terms of revenue, but we can get there. To be able to help us to reach out to the world.
When we talk about the revenue opportunity, I mean, what is the size of the business today, and where do you believe, if we continue at this pace without any government intervention, for instance, what do you believe it could potentially be?
Well, I think I dare say 1% of the GDP or less than 1% of the GDP right now, which is not that big. And it punches way above its weight when it comes to perception and noise, right? Because it's an industry everyone loves sort of talking about. But it also presents you massive headroom for growth. That tells you that that's a huge potential. Considering our population, we're reaching out to 3 to 4% of our audiences in a theater with our biggest hits. What does that tell you? That definitely means that 95% of the population who might have enjoyed watching our films does not have the opportunity to do so because they don't have theaters where they live. That's a massive opportunity as well. So I know we talk about lower occupancies, but those lower occupancies might be because of oversaturation in certain places and under exploitation in others. So I think the sky's the limit in terms of where we can go.
So what is the next, of course, the Anarchy is the big one as far as your global aspiration is concerned. But outside of that, I mean, what is exciting you about where RKF finds itself today?
Well, we're doing a lot of really interesting things when it comes to films and series right now. We've got a show called Matka King that we're doing for Amazon, which is, based on Matka, which was the illegal gambling syndicate that started in India in the 60s and went into the 70s as well. We've got one more show that we're doing with Amazon, which is on the floors right now. There are shows that we're talking to Netflix about that might go into production soon. We've got, various theatrical films that are in active casting right now. We've got the Anarchy as well. We've got a few other global projects that are under active discussion at this point of time that, like the Anarchy, will be set up internationally. So there's a lot going on.
potential headwinds for the industry. And I'll ask you this in the context of what we're now seeing happen in the Supreme Court, where a plea is being heard on whether there should be regulation of OTT content. And the Supreme Court has actually issued a notice to the center saying, are you looking at OTT regulation? As a producer, how concerned are you about that possibility, which now seems very real?
I think it's important for the redressal system that's been set up right now to be allowed to operate. It's a really good medium that's been found between the concerns that the government might have had earlier with the proliferation of OTT platforms. You've got a three-tier regulation system. From what I hear, it's working really well. You haven't had that many issues come up to the final tier. They've been sorted out even before that.
Is there, for the lack of a better word, self-censorship already?
I don't know if I'd call it self-censorship, but there's definitely more of an acknowledgement of the things that are hot button issues and just trying to veer away from them or if you do go towards them, then doing it with full knowledge that it might cause a concern.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot more of that's
happening. Do you consciously and actively stay away from hot button issues?
I do. Yeah. I do. Because, there's a lot of time, effort, money that goes into a project from a lot of people. And I think it's pretty heartbreaking when you go through all that effort and then it finally comes to naught because you probably should have been smarter about what you selected right at the start. And it just doesn't make sense. I think we're going through a very sensitive time as a country. For one reason or the other, not sure what it might be, but people are ultra sensitive about how certain groups might be perceived when it comes to certain issues, when it comes to religion, when it comes to nationalism, when it comes to caste. These are issues that just tend to create problems because there are certain interest groups that come up at the time that a film is happening that might want to gain prominence in PR and have no other opportunity to do so. So they latch on to a film. And these are sometimes things that a government can't do anything about, because if some local group is creating an issue, they can be silenced. But they can't really be put down completely, right? You can say things that might ask them to pipe down, but if they choose to create a disruption, that just causes, a sort of situation which you don't really want.
So what is sort of off the table then in this context for you? What are the sort of scripts or the sort of subjects or issues that you will not do?
See, it's not like will not do. It's about the intent with which you're doing it. I think because that's often seen. It's if you're talking about caste or religion or class or nationalism or things like that, if you're doing it in a way that is not pointlessly creating a conflagration in order to be able to drum up a controversy, then that's often something that the CBFC will see and that the redressal boards will also understand. But if it's being done in a little bit of a cynical way in order to create a bit of a disruption, then those are things that come to the fore. So it's not like I'd like to stay away from anything, but it's more about the way in which we tell that story that needs to be a bit more sensitive.
But do you think that the reality of regulation, not in this redressal way, but actual regulation, just like the way that films do, is something that we should be prepared for, ready for, as far as the OTT platforms are concerned?
See,
and
as
how
far
will
as
that
I'm
change
concerned,
the commissioning process?
Ideally, I don't believe we should have censorship. I think everyone should be allowed to tell the stories that they want to tell. I think we're a mature enough society. We're mature enough people. But the fact of life is that there is a certain heightened sensitivity. So we have to just accept that, whether we like it or not. And so it's a given that there will be a CBFC and there will be a redressal board. I don't think you need regulation beyond that. I think it's best for there not to be regulation, because with regulation comes a very doctrinaire approach to things which will try to codify certain things that sometimes it's very hard to codify creativity.
Yeah.
And you'd rather treat each case individually.
For instance, what constitutes as obscene, which is one of the observations and questions being discussed in the Supreme Court.
Exactly.
Yeah. But, as the sort of next wave of disruption, as the next set of trends that one should focus on, what do you believe are going to be the genres that you believe might take off from here?
That's a good question. I think mythology we haven't really explored as much as we should. probably because budgets did not allow us to do that. I mean, you had a lot of it happen on television in the Doordarshan days and even after. But I think told in your Lord of the Rings, sort of fashion, told with that pomp and splendor and with the right VFX and graphics and, spends really put towards it. We've got a treasure trove of stories that are just waiting to be told.
Are you going to tell them?
I hope so.
Anything that we should be ready for?
Well, I think I'm working on something on the Mahabharata that's a pretty interesting episode within the Mahabharata. Because sometimes you tend to want to tell the Mahabharata, but just the task is so daunting that you feel, how are you ever going to be able to do it? It's going to be 10 years of someone's life. It's going to be multiple films. But we, I think, have managed to come across one episode within the Mahabharata that we're very excited about telling.
Okay.
And that actually has a logical beginning, middle and end that, encapsulates, that has all the characters in it.
And this is going to be a film or a series?
A film.
A film. So mythology, what else?
I'd say horror is sort of evergreen in India. We love our horror films. And so, even when you see films that come in from the West, like The Conjuring, for example, work supremely well in India. So horror well told. I think you're seeing the horror comedy genre having its moment right now anyway. But horror definitely, thrillers. I wouldn't give up on drama theatrically.
Okay.
Like 12th Fail, I think told us that drama well told in an entertaining way and in a compelling way can still work in the cinema halls. A lot of people are feeling like dramas and rom-coms are now the exclusive preserve of streaming.
Yeah.
But I don't really believe that. So I'm quite optimistic about pretty much every genre.
Speaking of genres as well as the kind of movies that gave us joy. I mean, we're now going through a phase where re-releases are likely to be revenue drivers to try and get footfalls into cinema halls.
I just saw Andaz Apna Apna yesterday.
A classic. How many times have you watched that?
I can't even count.
What is the movie that you watched the most?
Sholay.
Sholay. How many times?
I mean, it's impossible to... I was watching it pretty much every 3 to 6 months at one
point. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Every 3 to 6 months?
Every 3 to 6 months. I started watching it when I was a kid at Minerva, where it had played the longest that I think any film has ever played, other than Dilwale now, has played at Maratha Mandir. And I used to take my poor grandfather there and torture him through having to buy tickets in black for me every few months.
Oh, why do you think Sholay has become this... has this cult status, which has been able to kind of cross over demographics, what have you?
It's a quintessential Hindi film in every sense of like mass commercial Hindi film told in the best possible way that when you define Bollywood, I think Sholay defines it. It's got everything you could ask for. It's got a great villain. It's got incredible heroes. It's got humor. It's got music, it's got action, it's got a really visceral core story at the heart of it. It's got landscapes that are just so incredibly diverse. What doesn't it have really? And it's told in such a beautiful way. So that's one film that, is sort of evergreen as far as I'm concerned.
Evergreen. So what's the recent film that you can sort of haven't got enough of?
A recent film that I haven't got enough of. I've stopped watching movies multiple times in the recent past as much.
Because they're not as compelling?
Not as compelling probably. But, again, Andaz Apna Apna, which I just mentioned. But yeah, that's still 30 years old.
Yes.
But not that many in the recent past that I've watched multiple times, I have to admit.
What is your own favorite film produced by you?
That's a really tough question.
It's like picking your favorite children. Pick one.
It's very tough. I'd say between Dangal, Burfy and Kaipoche, I think those are three that are closest to my heart in many ways.
And you did act, theatre, but not film.
Not film.
But that was never something that you considered?
I did theatre all through school and college, and I did it through my early professional life as well, though getting to rehearsals was very difficult. But I always enjoyed putting plays together. And I guess that speaks to the producer in me in many ways. When I was in Sydenham in the Dramatic Society, what I most enjoyed was raising sponsorship for the plays in the year.
Life comes a full circle. You're pretty much still doing that, aren't you?
figuring out what genre of plays we should have in that year. We should have one comedy and one drama and, one musical and so on and so forth. So that was, so having that bird's eye view probably, and having a little more control over the entire process and of the quality of output and what's going out, rather than really being up on stage, gave me much more joy.
So is that like, would you ever consider though?
Theatre maybe in the future.
Not film?
Not film.
No?
I think
Why
film
not?
as a medium is something that actors are very patient people. In film actors, they have to sit around a lot. I don't think I'd have the patience to do that.
One casting call that you haven't made is to Vidya. Why is that?
Well, we as a family have sort of have this semi-formal pact not to work together.
Not to work together.
So my brothers and Vidya and I have this sort of, it's not like carved in stone or something, but we just feel it's healthier not to.
So this was a conversation that you had, or this was a conversation that they brought up?
I think it came about over time, where we just realized that we'd rather be there for each other through our ups and downs as family, rather than actually being in there together in the trenches on the same project. Because the ups and downs in the business can get quite, emotional, and to sustain you don't want to be crying on each other's shoulders. You want one person crying on one person's shoulder at a point of time.
But, you talked about the ups and downs. What's your way of coping? What's your way of decompressing, of dealing with the kind of volatility and the uncertainty? I mean, how do you stay sane in a business that has a fair degree of chaos?
I guess developing a thick hide is really important. I think not letting failure or success get to you beyond a point. It's easier said than done. And allowing yourself time to enjoy a success, and then realizing that it's fleeting, and the time to grieve a failure, but then again realizing that that's fleeting too, and just picking yourself up and sort of moving on after that. But it's very important not to take things personally. That's very important, because things tend to be quite transactional, as they should be, and as it is in any business. But what happens in the entertainment business, I think, is people feel like it's because it's a creative business that there's a sense of relationships going beyond just the business, which might be true in some cases, as it is in most businesses. But you tend to get waylaid a little bit by that, at least in the initial period. But realizing that everyone's here to do a job, and no one means harm if you're going through a period of an up or going through a period of a down, just realizing that those things will happen and people will be different with you at different points of time, and just being able to cope with that.
What's been the biggest lesson for you through the many cycles that you've seen? And you've been around for about 2 decades now in this business.
Got the grey hair to show for it.
You don't have any, by the way.
I do, I assure you. The biggest lesson, I mean, there have been so many lessons, but I suppose when you're doing something that you love, just being able to seamlessly work that into your life so that it doesn't become either work time or leisure time. It's one thing is within the other, in a sense. So even if you're taking time off, I mean, I sort of will be watching my rushes of a film that's on, or reading a script, and then having fun too if I'm on vacation. And the other way around, when you're at work, and sort of working fun into that too. So that work-life balance thing, I think you can't really have, and you shouldn't try to have. So you might as well make work and life meld in a way. Because, I mean, it's not like work is not life and
yes, and life is not work. Yes,
exactly.
Both are pretty much. I agree with you there. So 5 years on, where do you believe RKF will be in its ambition, in its aspiration, as well as in its financials?
Well, the financials are hard for anyone to be able to project 5 years out, but where I definitely think we'd like to be is being able to tell great stories, compelling stories, both to our audiences in India as well as around the world, and also to global crossover audiences. So really to be able to be that one Indian content studio that is for India, but also is reaching out to the world.
Is that the aspiration, the Indian content studio for the world? Make in India for the world?
Indeed.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for speaking with us, and we wish you the very best of luck with that ambition, with the Anarchy, and a lot more. And we look forward to hearing back more from you. But thanks very much for joining us
Thanks
here
so
today,
much,
Siddharth.
Shereen.
Thanks
It was
so
great
much.
fun.
Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of the Young Turks podcast. From all of us here on the team for now, goodbye. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next week. Till then, thanks for watching. For more news and updates, all you need to do is follow CNBC TV 18 on all of our digital platforms.